to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Today on our show, we have Mark Anthony, who is known as the Psychic Lawyer. Mark is not only a very successful attorney, he is also a practicing medium who communicates with spirits. He graduated from Mercer Law School with honors, which included the study of law at Oxford University in England. He has also studied mediumship at the prestigious Arthur Findlay College. Mark is regularly featured on major television and radio shows and is a headline speaker nationwide. He is the best-selling author of two very highly rated books, Evidence of Eternity and Never Letting Go. His website is evidenceofeternity.com, or you can simply go to wedon'tdieradio.com and click on episode 124. That's 124. So now I am super excited to say, Mark Anthony, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you, Sandra. It's really great to be here. I've been really looking forward to your show.
Yes, and we have a whole bunch of listeners looking forward to it too, as I broadcasted that I got to interview today on Facebook, and tons of great reception, like how soon are you going to have it posted? So it'll be today as soon as we're done talking.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think so too. So Mark, first of all, a big... what do I want to say? Thank you for the difference that you're making in the world, for all the people, not only that you've helped believe in life after death, but you've helped them through grief. So just as one human being to another, I know it's a big, big, big deal. And so thanks for that.
I appreciate that. It's losing a loved one is just the most crushing and devastating thing that we go through. And anything that one person could do to alleviate that pain for another, and that truly is a calling and a gift. So I appreciate your kind words.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. And if you're listening to the show right now and you are experiencing the loss of a loved one, I can tell you what, when you believe that life after death is real and that you're going to see your loved one again, it makes the travel through grief to the other side so much better. Still, there's pain, but it really is better. So let's jump right in. Mark, could you tell us a little bit about you? Growing up, were you a kid that saw spirits, or did you know your life would take a turn like this? Maybe just a little bit about your background.
Well, the first 5 years of my life were pretty tough. And the reason I'm laughing is because I hear all these people that are always complaining about their childhood and how difficult it was.
Yes.
And I almost died when I was about 2.5, 3. And what happened was I stopped breathing. And we were living in Orlando at the time. My dad and my mom had moved down I was born in New Jersey, and we moved down to Florida because my dad got a job in aerospace, and he was away on a business trip, and I was real sick, and I just went into respiratory failure. And my mother ran outside of the house holding me, and she was screaming, "My baby's dying, my baby's dying. Oh my God, what am I going to do?" I mean, she was just frantic. And as fate would have it, an off-duty fireman just happened to be going for a walk down the street, and he ran across the street, and he got me on the ground and started doing chest compressions on me. And then the next thing I know, I was in the light, and there were these beings there. And the way I can describe them, Sandra, is, you ever see like a little Academy Award, Academy Award? They kind of look like people, but they were sort of outlines of people, but translucent. So when I say an Academy Award, they had a humanoid look, and they were like glowing, but you could see through them. It was like they were liquid almost. And the funny thing is, now when I do readings and I see an entity like that, that's generally an angel, an angelic entity. And these beings, they were really sweet to me, and they were real nice, and they were telling me everything was okay and don't worry, and that, you're loved, but you have to go back. And the next thing I remember then is I went like this, and I heard someone scream, "We got a pulse," and I was in an ambulance. and they were having trouble with the respirator because the respirator hose got caught in the door of the ambulance, which is going like 90 miles an hour. My mom was in there, and she goes, "I'll open the door." And so the paramedics got the respirator on my face. He's holding my mom by the waist, like on her dress, and she opened the door and pulled it in, and they go, "We lost him again." All of a sudden they go, "He's breathing,"
Oh
so
my
all of this is all this is going on. And so I had this near-death experience where I went into the light. But the fact of the matter is, the ability to perceive spirits, which started happening not long after that. And a lot of people indicate that a near-death experience will trigger it. But for the fact that my mother was a medium, my father had mediumistic ability, and it runs on both sides of my family for generations.
Wow.
So both of my parents were mediums. And, my dad was a NASA engineer. My mom was a commercial artist. It's not like, they went around like, "We see spirit." They didn't do that. We were pretty much mainstream America, sort of, kind of. And so in my study of genetics, I've found that there are many reasons that people inherit certain traits. I mean, there's a reason that you look like your parents. There's a reason left-handedness and twins run in families, intelligence, athletic prowess. There's also a reason certain diseases, cancers and such seem to run in families. And it appears that mediumistic and psychic abilities, an enhanced use of certain parts of your brain, are also a genetic trait. And so it's what's called a recessive trait. And a recessive trait means that, like in my family, most people have brown hair and brown eyes, but every couple of generations there's someone with blue eyes. So, and psychic ability is a recessive trait. But when both parents possess the same recessive trait, then the likelihood of one of the offspring, meaning me, is going to have that trait intensifies. So that's what happened. And then I started seeing spirits around the age of 4. And my parents didn't chastise me or treat me that it was weird or anything like that. But they told me just to kind of keep it in the house because most people wouldn't understand. And so it's always been there, but I kind of kept it shelved, and I didn't think it was all that weird until I started getting older and realizing that not everybody's mom was like my mom.
Yeah.
Not everybody's family, had this whole spiritual thing going on. And especially when I'd encounter people that, neighbors and friends, they were, evangelical types, and they'd be going, "Oh, things like that are evil. And I'm looking at it going, "Well, no, it isn't," because, my mother sees spirits, and she's a very good and loving and pious and faithful person. And, my family, we were good people. And so I saw from a pretty young age that dogmatic, entrenched religion had less to do with God and more to do with supporting a bureaucracy and an organization.
Yes.
And that God is an energy that we're all connected to, and a goodness and a love, and a beautiful light. And so I learned from a young age that the light is pure and cannot be polluted, but it certainly can be blocked by people and their behaviors. So that's kind of how my childhood was. And then as I got older, having been raised in a Catholic background, I wanted to go into the clergy, but I felt that it was too restrictive. You have to follow the teachings of the church. You can't believe this. You can't believe that. You can only believe this. And I once again, by the time I was like 15, I saw that that's too restrictive. That's too restrictive. So I almost became a priest, but I thought there were too many rules, so I went to law school.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What
does
was I
that?
thinking?
Oh my.
So that's kind of in a nutshell, kind of my first 20 years, if you will.
When you went and got interested in law school, I mean, was there ever a time that you put these beings and the mediumistic abilities kind of on the back burner, and as a young man, you're thinking about life and all
sure.
that stuff? Yeah, you know what I'm asking. Has it always been present for you?
Yeah, when you get into school, the spiritual encounters were always there, but particularly when you get into an intensive left-brained activity like law school, where things logic and evidence, and it's all being shoved down your throat, and it's all very coercive, and not to disparage the legal profession, but a lot of aggressive people are attracted to it because our ideals of justice are inspirational, but our system of justice can be a joke, and it all becomes about money and power as opposed to truth, justice, and what is right. So that takes a back burner to all of these special interests. And I'm sure I'm offending a lot of people by saying that, but unfortunately, once you get into the practice of law, it becomes not about doing the right thing or not about justice. It becomes who has more money, who has more leverage and power, and who can outmaneuver who. And that's where it all goes wrong. On the other hand, I don't know what we'd replace it with that would be any better. And Winston Churchill said that our legal system was inefficient. It was, it was unfair. It was unbalanced, but it was better than anything else that's ever been tried. And I tend to agree with that.
It's funny, Mark, because we're recording this November 7th, 2016. I'm always thinking somebody's going to be listening to this 10 years in the future, but this is when we're recording it. And tomorrow is our presidential election here in the United States. So it's really, I think it's going to be the perfect interview for the perfect day.
Well, speaking of train wrecks,
I know.
I'm not going to weigh in on either side, but this is without a doubt, and I'm going to paraphrase the news reporter Chris Wallace, Mike Wallace's son. He said this is the most negative and issue-less campaign that he's ever covered in his life. And it really shows the sad state of affairs when the two most despised politicians in the country are running against each other, and it's come down to personal insults and vendettas and all of this. And the real loser is the American people. And I feel that both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, have failed the American people miserably because there's been a polarization in our politics since the first Clinton administration, where if the Democrats are in power, the Republicans do nothing but try to undo that, and vice versa, as opposed to, and not that I'm, worshiping or extolling him, but in the Reagan era, you had a president that could reach across the aisle. Now, they didn't always get along, but the fact of the matter is we're all Americans first. And that there are some things, like some of the Democrats' ideas are really good, some of the Republicans' ideas are really good, and some of both parties' ideas are really bad. And they really need to stop trying to destroy each other's hold on power and realize that the focus needs to be the people of the United States. And I'm wondering if this election is like a big pimple that's been festering and oozing, and we're about to pop it, and maybe this will bring all of that out, and maybe whoever gets elected, maybe he or she will do a good job. Let's hope he or she does. But maybe in 4 years, there'll be a reinventing of the way we're doing business. So I'm an incurable optimist, and I always believe that we can survive and recover from anything, and let's hope that we do.
Let's tie this in with the subject of the show, which is life after death. In a few minutes, we'll talk about why you believe, but I'm a big proponent that if we don't die, life is for a reason. It's for our soul's growth and so many things. But if you are somebody in the United States listening right now, and this is going on, Mark, do you feel there's some growth that we can take on for ourselves, for our souls, instead of, because I see it all around me, people are just making the politicians wrong. Is there some way that we can look at this for ourselves? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Trying to empower people.
Well, let's now that I've crashed on this whole election,
Yeah, it's all
we
right.
grow in response to adversity.
Okay.
And perhaps both parties and perhaps the people need to see this adversarial situation in all of its ugly faces. Okay. Both candidates are horrible in different ways. Okay. So I'm going to go on record and say that. So if people start, from the Republican Party want to start picking at me and people in the Democrat Party start picking at me, well, that's your choice. But the fact of the matter is, perhaps we need this to realize that we have to change for the better, for the better. And with death and dying, to segue into what your question is, the other side, in my communication with the other side, spirits are not miserable. There is no archetypal hell that I learned about in Catholic school and in Christian teachings or in Islamic teachings of, a guy with a pitchfork running around sticking it in the wazoo if you're bad and, burning in coals and all that nonsense. And that there's a historical basis why people think of that and how it evolved into that. But the other side is pure energy. It's a quantum field, and I'll get into explaining that later. Long story short, energy doesn't get old. It doesn't die. It doesn't get sick. Energy is a perfect thing. Yet in that perfect state, there are things apparently that we cannot experience, such as negativity, sickness, death, pain. So we come into this incarnation, into this material world, to experience these things for various reasons. And think about it, Sandra, the times in your life when you have grown the most as a person, as a spiritualist, as a journalist, has it been when everything's just peachy and wonderful?
Hell no.
Exactly. We grow in response to adversity because the fact of the matter is, if everything's wonderful, what is your incentive to change? You don't have an incentive to change because why should you? But when things are bad, that's when you change. That's when you grow. And there's nothing we can do about the fact someone we love dies. And we can take the path of alcoholism and drug addiction and impulsive behaviors and anger, which is a path some people choose on the journey through grief, or you can isolate yourself, become lonely and withdrawn and hateful and bitter, or you can realize that in gain there is loss, and loss there is gain, and that who and what we are is more than this physical being, and become a deeper, a more compassionate, a more spiritual, a more philosophical person. And so the journey through grief, like the journey through politics, isn't about being all happy. Yeah, and it's so funny because every 4 to 8 years, change you can believe in. We're going to change, make this, make that,
Right.
together more, change. It's like, so all they're saying is the state we're in stinks and I'll make it even better. And then 4 years from now, someone says, well, the state he created or she created really bites. So now we're going to, the fact of the matter is, it's almost a metaphor for living in the material world, that constant change, adversity is a motivation for us to change. And you can take the easy path, which all too often is a self-destructive one, or you can take the higher road. And the higher road is difficult, but the higher road always has the better view. So
Aha.
yes.
I like
So
that.
that's the way we can look at it. That's the way we should be looking at it, is that all this pain and suffering we endure in the material world is for a reason, even when you feel isolated, alone, and feel that you don't matter. The fact is, you do.
Oh, I even think of when my dad passed away, my siblings stopped talking to me. I was in the lowest of low state I've ever been in. But that adversity got me to study grief, got me into more of life after death. And now look where I am. I mean, it's incredible. And I want to just challenge everybody because I think, Mark, I don't know if you were this way, but I certainly was. Like, who am I? Who's going to listen to me? I'm a chef by trade. I'm no author. Who's going to care? And even with the election, the adversity, or if you're experiencing grief or some other adversity in your life, Do you want to take the easy path, which might be destructive, or take the higher road with the better view? I mean, just challenge everybody to pick an adversity in your life and grow from it. This is awesome how we tied in the election with life after death.
Well, it's such a good
Yeah,
example of
yeah.
misery and suffering. And, I'm just going to be glad not to have to listen to these hate-filled commercials.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just dreadful. But, people think this is the worst election we've ever had. When John Adams was running for president against Thomas Jefferson, Jefferson accused John Adams of being a hermaphrodite.
Oh,
Uh,
my.
Andrew Jackson, and I'm not a big fan of his. I mean, he's down in history as being one of our great presidents, but what he did to the Cherokee Nation, the Cherokee people, and the Trail of
Oh,
Tears
it's brutal.
it's just sickening. And his wife was called every acronym and terrible name for being a prostitute and all that. So there's nothing unusual in American history about dirty politics. It's been that way from day one. We think of the founding fathers, and we'll get back to the life after death. But since this is the election show, the founding
Who
fathers as
knew? Yeah.
being these enlightened men sitting around going, "Oh yes, we're going to create this incredible country." Well, let's look at who they were. Okay, at least half of them owned slaves. Okay,
Right.
none of them allowed women to vote, so they were racist. They were slave owners. They were misogynistic. Okay, they had a very narrow world view. They were living in the horse and buggy era, but they also knew that change was an inevitability, which is why they allowed the Constitution to be amended. And they also knew that religion must not control government, because they were looking at 1,500 plus years of European history and saw one religious war after the next. And the United States, with the possible exception of the Netherlands, in 1790, when the Constitution was put into effect, 1790, 1792, was the only Western country without a religious head of state. For example, in Great Britain, the monarch is the head of the Church of England. In Spain,
Mm-hmm.
there would be a Catholic cardinal assigned to the royal court. In France and in every other country, there'd be some type of religious head of state. And the founding fathers saw that religion is not government, and when it becomes government, it becomes a tyrannical dictatorship. And people say, well, we need to get more religion in government. It's like, really? Look at Iran. Look at Saudi Arabia. Look at ISIS. Look at the Taliban. Okay? Do you really want religion controlling government? And so the founding fathers were very, very far-seeing about that, and they knew that slavery had to end. Okay, but they realized that was a battle for another time, which eventually it became. So we have to look at them as being children of the time, and it's just pathetic that it took so long for number one, for slavery to be abolished, and number two, for women to be part of the political process. So political and social change is slow, but because of those negatives, that gave an incentive to change and to grow, and we're still changing and we're still growing along those lines today.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm done with the
Well
politics.
said. No, I appreciate it. I have been avoiding getting into political conversations because I'm seeing they're breaking up relationships and families and friendships. I'm like, that's just so silly. Come on, people. But anyways, let's go into life after death, because you are a famous medium with 2 books published. You're on TV and radio, and you speak at huge events. You're a big deal. Let's see, how do we even ask this? When did you decide, being an attorney, that it's time to step into the world of being a medium? Like, what gave you that push?
It seems like it was chosen for me, as opposed to being a choice that I consciously made.
Say more about
And well, I always had these abilities, and then when I was practicing law full time, I I was always treated a little bit differently by my colleagues, because especially like during jury selection, I could kind of figure out like what was going on with people. And in this one case, my client was kind of a big country sort of guy, and he got into a bar fight with another guy. So, and he was like sort of redneck A got in a fight with redneck B. And I don't mean to, to insult anybody, but it's what it was. It's two big guys duking it out. And but it was a crime of violence, and my guy was the winner, so the loser brought charges. And so we're doing jury selection. And jury selection occurs before the trial begins. You bring in a panel of people and you ask them questions to see if we can, both the prosecution and defense can narrow out any bias or prejudice, and then end up, in this case, with a jury of 6 people plus 1 alternate that'll be, fair and impartial. And I kept getting drawn to this one juror that I, euphemistically refer to as juror number 9. And it was this attractive Latino woman, and Latina woman, and I kept feeling a female spirit around her and this tightening around my throat. And so I said, have you or has anyone in your family, this is the question I'm asking her in jury selection, ever been the victim of a violent crime? And all of a sudden she began to tremble, and the tears came to her eyes, and she looked up at me and she said, a year ago, my sister was in a foreign country when an escaped mental patient strangled her, dismembered her body, and threw her in a garbage can.
Oh, my.
And I'm standing there, and I mean, you could have heard a pin. Even the prosecutor was a real, loudmouth, didn't know what to say. And everyone in the courtroom's looking at me, and I feel the tightening around my throat's intensifying. I'm starting to see the spirit taking form, my mind's eye behind her. And if you want to know what happens, you're going to have to read my book, Never Letting Go, because in Never Letting Go, I explain about that. And it started intensifying. And then when my mother died, and I was very close with Mom. Mom was a medium, and because we'd go out to lunch and like read people's auras and stuff, which you're really not supposed to do. But that's kind of what we did, and we didn't share the information with anybody. But we were real close. And when she died, I was absolutely devastated. And people think, well, you're a medium, that shouldn't bother you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thank you. As if grief and pain and anguish bounce off of me. If anything, being a medium, we have to be extremely emotionally sensitive, because it's all about opening up and tuning into frequency, and that's an emotional thing. And so I started finding Mom coming to me, and then other people that I know who had died, and it started intensifying. And my mom's spirit conveyed a message to me that you've been given the gift of mediumship so you would not be crushed by grief, but now you must help those who are suffering with their grief. And I was at this grief counseling group at the local Catholic church, and I went there for about a month or so. Mm-hmm. And what it was turning into is, in the group discussions, I'd be saying to people, well, if your son were here, he'd like you to know this, because her son was there. And if your mom would want, and so the facilitator of the group, and she was real nice, she was from Ireland, and she said to me, Mark, you can't be doing this. I said, doing what? She goes, you know what I'm talking about? They're talking to spirits. I go, but we're in a Catholic church. Isn't that what we do? Mm-hmm. She goes, you know what I mean? So I decided to stop going. And then about a month later, I was at the grocery store, and this little tiny lady walked up to me, and I remembered her from the grief group. She was in her 80s, and her husband had passed. They'd been married like 60 years. And I remember she took my hand and said, Mark, would you come back to the group? You made us feel better.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's what made me decide to write Never Letting Go, because I realized that spirit communication, the ability to reach out to the other side, which is available to everyone in one form or another, but there are some people who are simply better at it than others. It's like some people are better athletes, some people are better musicians or mathematicians or whatever. And that spirit contact is an important tool in helping people heal from grief. And right after that, it's like all of a sudden the door was flung open, and the demand for my services as a medium started taking up most of my time. Then Never Letting Go became a major spiritual bestseller. It's in, I don't know, half a dozen languages now, and the speaking engagements. Because people ask me, well, how do I do what you're doing? I have no idea. It just happened.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened, and I realized stop resisting, just go with it. Because for a long time I thought I'd continue practicing law and do this. So what I do now in a legal capacity is I'm the go-to guy on radio and television shows when there are spiritual or paranormal issues that collide with legal ones. And it's much more widespread in this day and age. So I'm a legal analyst on cases like that, or in high-profile cases. I've commented on everything from the DNA linking this one suspect to the Jack the Ripper murders, to the Clutter family murders in cold blood, demonic possession as a defense, suing to get out of your lease because you think the house is haunted, insurance coverage for ghost hunters. Okay, running around in an insane asylum at night and someone falls and breaks their leg, somebody's getting sued. And now I'm giving lectures on quantum physics, being able to prove or at least provide the theoretical basis for the existence of an afterlife. And so I talk about near-death experiences. So I'm going all over the country to provide these discussions and to do readings, and it keeps me active legally as well. So it's I don't know if there's a formula for my career, but this is what has happened with me.
And you're one of a kind.
So it would seem, but so are we all. And the reason that I say this, a lot of times people think, I don't matter.
Yeah, right.
What have I done? I've made no effect on anyone. Well, do you think there's a reason that your fingerprints are unique among all the billions of people who have lived? Even identical twins who technically share the same DNA, there are subtle differences between the two, and they have different fingerprints. So every single human being is unique, and that person's perspective and experiences are unique to that person. So for good, bad, or and I don't say indifferent, because everybody matters in their own way, we all have a reason that we're here and why we're here. And so maybe you don't speak to thousands of people, or maybe you don't run for president, or you have created a formula which has proved string theory or whatever. Maybe you are sitting on a bus and somebody next to you opens up to you and starts talking to you, and you listen to that person, and you give that person some encouragement, or at least acknowledge their existence, and then that person does not go home and commit suicide like he was planning to do.
Right.
Okay. A lot of times we have no idea how we affect people. And I try to tell people, be nice. I mean, all the religions are boiled down to two words. Be
nice.
Be nice,
Yeah.
And I've had some people say, they had a reading with me, they go, you weren't nice to me. What it is, a lot of times they'll say, I'm getting this. Does that make sense? I'm getting something in the end of June. Does that make sense? His favorite color was yellow. It's like, that's not what I'm asking you. And I don't mean it like that, because when you're connecting with spirits, they're transmitting messages so quickly to you, and you get an image, a sensation, a feeling. And if you ask the client, does that make sense, or do you recognize this? And they go off on a tangent, or they're not listening. Sometimes the medium can come across as being short, and we don't mean to be that way. It's because we've got to convey that information, because once they convey it, they're moving on to something else. And so sometimes people think, well, you're being short with me, because a lot of people come to a medium and what they want to hear is, oh, your grandmother's here. She loves you. She brings you joy. She wants you to be uplifted. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Anyone could say that. But when they start saying, well, I'm getting this whole thing with the left hand, left finger of your grandmother, and it almost feels like it was severed. Well, yeah, Gran had her left finger cut off, okay, on her pinky, on her left hand cut off. Okay, that's a piece of evidence that I don't know, that the spirit is transmitting to me. So if I get something in the hand, well, her favorite color was pink. Well, that's not what I'm asking. The message that I'm getting is relating to that particular thing. Now, why is that important? That's important because in true mediumship, which I would call interdimensional communication, anyone can say she's here, she loves you, and she wants you to be happy. But when you start transmitting to the client facts, evidence, personality quirks, idiosyncrasies, shared memories, things about the client, because spirits can bring up stuff about you that nobody would have a reason to know. This is the basis of evidential mediumship. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it isn't always readily apparent. I was doing a reading the other day, and this woman's husband came through, and I saw a box of raisins, and it was California raisins. And I said, I'm here and heard it through the grapevine. She goes, I'm not sure what that means. But then the next day I got an email from her, and she said not long before her husband died, she and a group of her friends and her husband went to a Halloween party dressed up as the California raisins.
Oh.
Okay? But it took her some time to oh my God, that's what that meant. And so a lot of times in a reading, people think, well, you're being short. It's like, come on, I've got this thing about raisins. And they don't quite understand what's going on in the thought processes. So I know I'm going off on a bit of explanation.
Keep talking.
Well, this is how you prove the existence of an afterlife. Mm-hmm. And then people will say, well, you're just reading somebody's mind. Well, I was doing a reading on a radio show. And the host was awesome. She's a teenager, and she's got this radio show called Crystal Kids.
Fun.
So her uncle comes through. She asked me to do a reading for her on air, and I did a reading. And an uncle that she'd never met came through, and I kept seeing 519, 519, 519. She goes, I don't know what that means. I said, that's fine. Just make a note of that. Maybe you can substantiate it later on. And then the uncle transmitted some other things. After the reading, after the show, she contacted her mom, and her mom said, oh my gosh, that was your father's brother who died before you were born. Funny thing is, he died on May 19th, 519. Now, if that wasn't in her mind, and we were doing the interview by telephone, okay, so I don't know how I'm supposed to read somebody's mind over the telephone, okay, if it isn't in her brain to begin with, how is it that I'm reading it? You see what I'm saying?
I do. Are you still there?
Light speed, at least, okay, is able to transmit deep information like that.
We cut in and out just for a second, so I don't think I lost you, but we're together now.
Okay. See, somebody's cutting us in and out.
Yeah, they like to keep us on our toes. Yeah, but it makes perfect sense if that person doesn't even know it to begin with. I mean, that's the best kind of evidence, I think, is when they go back and they find out, my gosh, that was true. Why do you think a lot of our brains, it's so hard for us to not even accept it, but we have this skeptical mind that's thinking it can't be true? You have any thoughts on that?
It's fear of the unknown, because you see, children see spirits a lot, and it's because they're not taught to be afraid, and they're not taught to think that if you can't see, smell, taste, or touch it, that it somehow or hear it, that it somehow doesn't exist. And what happens is it just gets very hard for a lot of people to believe that someone that you love, once they've died, there's anything beyond this life. It's like the philosophical movement existentialism. Mm-hmm. Existentialism to me is an outgrowth after World War II, and it's when you're dead, you're dead. So when you're alive, enjoy your life. And you can understand that. I mean, World War II was just an absolutely horrific low point in human history. Not that we've ascended real high since then. But existentialism is a very negative and narrow-minded philosophy because, but they look at it like this. Well, since you're not going to be around to be upset that you're dead, it won't matter. Okay? You exist. I think, therefore I exist. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny when, and I'll give a snippet from Evidence of Eternity. My best friend's name was Billy. And Billy and I traveled all over the Far East. He was a linguistics genius. He used to teach English to executives in Japan. He could speak English, Japanese, Thai, Indonesian, and wherever we went, he'd pick up the language. Wow. Really quickly. And we met when we were 11 years old. And our birthdays were a week apart. We were like brothers. I grew up at his house. He grew up at my house. Went to college together. And we had this ongoing discussion our entire lives about life after death, which I, of course, believed in because I see spirits. He says, well, I don't believe you can do that. I don't believe in it. He never wanted, me to make a connection for him. He didn't believe it. And he married this beautiful woman from Japan. And then I get a call from her one day, and she said that he was in intensive care. That he had taken a drug overdose and he was having a lot of problems with depression and alcoholism, and there was all sorts of stuff going on with him. And she said, Mark, the doctors want me to take him off life support. They want me to kill him. I can't do this. And I said, then don't. And she's like, you're the only one I can talk to, because his parents, one had Alzheimer's, the other was had just died. And her family was all in Japan. And I said, don't do it. And so 3 hours later, he expired of his own accord. Mm-hmm. And I know she never would have forgiven herself if she would have done that. The doctors were saying, take him off. She says, no, I won't do that. And then I got the call and I was devastated. Of course. This is like, it's my brother.
Friend, yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. And I told my secretary at the time, I go, cancel everything. I'm just going home. And I came home and I was sitting in my living room by myself. And all of a sudden I look up and there's Mom. And she goes, I brought somebody. And she steps aside and there he is. And he says, well, I guess you won that argument.
Oh.
And so, and here's the thing. I wasn't sure if this was real. And this ties into your question earlier. Why do people have a hard time believing it? And why I didn't believe it was real is because I wanted this to be real. Okay? And I'm like, I need verification on this. And he kind of smiled and they just all sort of pixelated, their image pixelates from my view. So about an hour and a half later, the phone rings and it's my friend Lydia. And she's a famous medium. And she was going to be teaching a class and asked if I'd be assisting on this class. And then while we're talking, I didn't mention anything about Billy. She said, I'm picking up on this male energy around you. Blonde hair, blue eyes, real outdoorsy type, and something about some argument that you won.
Oh my gosh.
And all of a sudden it's like I was ready to jump for joy because now I have the validation that it wasn't me wanting it to happen, that it did happen. So the moral of the experience is that, yes, as mediums, we grieve just as heavily as anyone else. And when it happens to us, we sometimes are in a state of disbelief and need the validation as well.
We're human.
And
it's all part of it.
Absolutely.
Wow. Do you believe that we come into this lifetime with certain things we want to do, certain, what am I trying to say, lessons to learn, that we pick our death, if somebody's, because that ties in, there's a lot of people that I know personally that have lost a loved one to suicide or they've lost a child. What is your take on that kind of stuff? Do we come into life like we're going to be a bad guy or a good guy and it's all to help the other person grow? Do you have any thoughts in that realm?
I definitely have thoughts on that. And this is one of the most difficult questions and dilemmas to face because how can somebody say that the point of my life was to lose my child? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was honored and privileged to be interviewed by Shirley MacLaine earlier this year. Yeah, that was
Wow.
that was a total trip. I mean, she's awesome because she has a radio show, through her network, and she caught a lot of flack for saying that Adolf Hitler came into this world for a specific reason to basically dole out karmic lessons and experiences for people. Well, immediately the press turned that into Shirley MacLaine's a Nazi and supporting Adolf Hitler, and that is not what she meant. In fact, I asked her about it because we were talking about things like this. That I think what you meant was that whatever happens, some people that come into this life are here because they're supposed to be negative in this life and create these negative experiences. And she said, well, that's what I meant, but people weren't listening to me. And so when a child dies, and that is absolutely horrifying and horrible and terrible, and what the parents go through is beyond nightmarish, it creates a ripple effect. The devastation, the sadness, it creates so many repercussions.
Yes.
And that is the lesson, and how people react to it and how they grow from it may be the reason that this happens. Now, I am not justifying the death of a child. I am not downplaying anyone's suffering or trivializing or marginalizing them in any way. It's trying to understand this. Now, of course, the cynics are like, it's all chaos and we're all thrown together and it's all random and nothing matters. But I don't see that. In the thousands of spirits I've communicated with, they're all very clear that everything that happens for a reason. And once again, you come into the material world to experience negative things and pains and anguish that you cannot experience when you are pure energy. And that's why these things happen. And it doesn't make it easier knowing that, but perhaps it adds some perspective.
Yeah, when my dad was dying, he had cancer, and Dad, Catholic, went to church every single day, and I watched him suffer a very difficult death with cancer. But I found some quote in the Bible that had to do with suffering, and I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was something to the fact that, well, I'm going to put it in Sandra language, but the more you suffer, the more of a spiritual growth you have, the closer you'll be to Jesus or something like that. It wasn't exactly that, but it was just, it gave me the what if, like really, what if you get the most bang for your buck here on planet Earth through the bad times instead of the good times? Well,
the Buddha said life is suffering. And the Hindus also look at suffering as part of the journey in life. I remember growing up and seeing all these trust funder kids, and, for their birthday, they'd get a BMW, and they never had to work, and it looked like life was one big party. And then like 10, 15 years later, I'm practicing law, and they're coming to me for their DUI arrest, their drunk driving, and their drug possession, and their spouse battery, and the way they acted and the way they talked. To me, they developmentally still acted and appeared to be not appearance-wise so much, but their behavior like teenagers.
Yeah,
and there was no growth there because they didn't earn anything in life. And so by going through a lifetime where there is suffering and difficulty, that's when we grow. And so it appears, Sandra, that once we leave this life, and I believe in reincarnation, but we go to the other side, it's not just, hi, here we are on the other side, there is a whole slew of frequencies and levels. And think about like the frequencies in XM, FM, AM radio. Mm-hmm. We know in the electromagnetic spectrum, you got gamma rays, X-rays, microwaves, all these different types of frequencies. So the other side is the same way, and getting to these higher bands, higher frequencies also seems to be related to not having to come back to the lower frequency, which is the world we live in. And that may be part of it. And I believe that it is. Now, there's no way for us to prove this, at least not at this point in time. But that's also something Hindus believe, Buddhists believe. There is that old expression, you got to go through hell before you get to heaven. So this appears to be hell. In other words, earth is hell, and of course, there's many beautiful and wonderful things, and being in love and prosperity and good health and all that are really nice. But the fact of the matter is, there's no archetypal hell on the other side. The hell is when you have to come back here and face the things that confront us in a material world existence.
That makes sense. And all of this, I feel, empowers how we're going to choose to live life. Do we play it safe, or do we be courageous? All that.
Well, there's a choice as well. And I think it depends on the situation. I mean, when you have children, you certainly playing it safe is not a bad thing. But it's funny because I remember growing up and my parents were from the city, and they didn't believe in sheltering us. If we had a question, they answered it. We had frank discussions about sex and about violence and about things like that. And I knew other children who, I've never seen that. I was sheltered, and their parents thought they were doing a good job by making sure that that child had absolutely no common sense, no street smarts or wherewithal to deal with manipulative and predatorial personalities.
Right.
When they were flung out into the real world. I mean, seeing the naivete. And I also saw this, when I started practicing law, I'd been around. I mean, I was young when I practiced. When I got out of law school, I was only I think I was 23 when I graduated. But I was anything but naive. And I would see some people that just had no clue what the real world was like. And that's all part of growth. Now, that doesn't mean, make your kids go sleep in an alley and,
Right.
But I don't think sheltering a child and insulating them from the realities which are out there is helping them, because forewarned is forearmed. Expect the best, but be prepared for the worst.
My dad would really like you.
Why do you say that?
Just just the way you talk. I don't know why that just came into my mind, and maybe it's my dad saying, I really like this guy, Sandra. It just, yeah, you're easy to listen to. I'm right with you on your thoughts and concepts, and you're cool, Mark.
Oh gosh,
You're
well,
sharp
thanks.
and you're cool. Let's keep going though, because time goes by so quickly. Oh my gosh. So you're practicing medium, you speak all over, you're on TV, radio, etc., so forth, but you have 2 books. Can you tell us a little bit about what makes them different, and what, I don't want to say what kind of people need to read them, but I'm a fan of myself purchasing my books, or the books from my guests. And I don't know which one to get first, and just explain them, because I've never really looked on Amazon and found somebody who's got so many 5-star reviews and a ton of them. So it's people love your words. And tell us a little bit about your books.
Well, Never Letting Go, my first book, is a guide on the journey through grief. And it is inspirational in that it provides messages of love and healing from the other side. It teaches you how to recognize when loved ones or spirit are near, and it has a very large healing component. And it's been recommended by hospices and grief organizations all over the world. And a lot of people tell me that when they're kind of in that fog right after the death of a loved one, that Never Letting Go brought them a lot of clarity and a lot of comfort. And so when I was on the Never Letting Go tour, people started asking me questions about reincarnation, about grief, about suicide, about homicide, about the physiology behind spirit communication. Is there a scientific basis for this? And so I started keeping track of the most asked questions, and that was the birth of Evidence of Eternity. So Evidence of Eternity is not Never Letting Go Part 2. It stands on its own, and it explains spirit communication and the afterlife in terms of science, theoretical physics, human physiology, evidence, and faith. And it's been endorsed by the top near-death experience researchers in the world. Dr. Mai Haley, Alex Haley's widow, endorsed it. Shirley MacLaine said it is a must-read. William Bowman from the the Monroe Out of Body Experience Institute. So it's been endorsed by the scientific community. And what I enjoyed about Evidence of Eternity is that I was able to redefine terminology relating to spirit communication. I've introduced new concepts like interdimensional communication for what most people call mediumship, because that's what we're doing. We're in one dimension. We're overlapping our frequency with another dimension to communicate with spirits, henceforth interdimensional communication. Frequency beacons is another one of the concepts. Spiritual situational awareness, multiple meaning messages, the collective consciousness disconnect. And so it explains a lot of those things. So what I recommend is reading Never Letting Go first, and then going to Evidence of Eternity. I'm starting on my new book, which I want to get into quantum consciousness and explaining the nature of the soul in terms of quantum energy.
Wow.
It's
wow.
And the fact is, Sandra, it can take lifetimes, and that's sort of a mediumistic joke.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Lifetimes to even become close to understanding this. And funny thing is, I've been studying quantum physics, and one day I was getting really frustrated with it, and then I saw a quote. I think it was from Heisenberg, who's a great physicist, and he said, "Whenever you think you understand quantum physics, you really don't."
Very funny. Can we rest assured that when we close our eyes on planet Earth this last time, that we will be greeted by our loved ones and our pets, and that there's this place, and yes, to reincarnation, I believe that too, but that we'll get to hug them again and see them again and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Absolutely. And even if the person has reincarnated, you can still communicate with their spiritual aspects. So you're never going to miss a loved one. Okay. And that's one of the things I explain in the chapter on reincarnation and Evidence of Eternity. So the fact of the matter is, when it is our time to cross, you will see and encounter your loved ones in the light. And this is not just me saying this. Near-death experience research has indicated this. People who have been studying spirit communication for centuries, all the great faiths teach this. But now we're seeing from a scientific standpoint, this appears to be true. In fact, Dr. Raymond Moody, who started near-death experience research back in the 70s and who also endorsed Evidence of Eternity, he is conducting research now where somebody who's terminally ill, be they at a home or in hospice or in a hospital bed, and it's not uncommon for someone to say, "Oh my gosh, I'm seeing Aunt Martha and Uncle Bob." Okay, well, the thought is, well, spirits that are on the other side are around this person. So when this person transitions, what these studies are showing is that family members, hospital workers, hospice workers are also seeing these spirits.
That's amazing.
And so this is a whole new field of study, and this isn't just something in the U.S. This is going on worldwide that they're noticing this. And so it's all quantum physics. It's all frequency. What's happening is that these spirits are slowing down their frequency and vibration so that the terminally ill person can see them. And what happens is other people are now seeing them too because their frequencies are aligning. And this to me is just incredibly exciting. So when somebody who's terminally ill starts talking about seeing a loved one, don't dismiss that.
Right.
Don't dismiss that. I wish we had more time because I'd love to talk about terminal lucidity, which is another aspect to this field of study.
We have about 5 minutes left, if that works
That
for you.
ought to do it. All right, terminal lucidity.
Yeah.
People who are in advanced states of dementia and Alzheimer's, right before they die, they open up their eyes, they'll sit up or they'll speak, they'll be absolutely coherent. And they may say, "Oh my gosh, Aunt Martha," or they may look at their loved ones around them and say, "I love you, thank you, I'll miss you," and then they die. Now, when you look at the brain of somebody on Alzheimer's compared to a healthy brain, the Alzheimer's brain looks shrunken and shriveled because the blood vessels are collapsed and emaciated, which is why the brain isn't getting fed properly, and so it has this very dried up, emaciated appearance. And this organ appears to be completely incapable of allowing a person to come out of the non-responsive Alzheimer and demented dementia state to communicate. So here's the theory, and this is what I believe, is the brain does not create consciousness, it merely houses it. So when the organism, our body, is beginning to shut down and we're transferring our energy is getting ready to transfer to the eternal state from being anchored to a body, that's what's happening. The spirit's emerging, and all of a sudden the person is like given a boost for a second to where they can say a few things, and they appear completely rational and conscious because for that split second they are, because that's pure spiritual energy as opposed to a function of the brain which is no longer functioning properly. And that's been termed or referred to as terminal lucidity because they're terminally ill, they're going to die, and all of a sudden they have a lucid, coherent moment. And this is being documented in thousands of cases all over the world. Yeah. I think it's fascinating and very, very encouraging.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, this hasn't been enough time, so I'm going to read your books and keep in touch with you because now, like it or not, we are new friends.
I got to come back to your show.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can speak on my stage when I host one of those big events. I got big plans myself. Big plans. Any closing words, Mark?
Well, if people would like to find out about having a session with me, please visit my website, evidenceofeternity.com. And most of the readings I do are over the phone, and my staff will be happy to set you up. So evidenceofeternity.com. Also, about my books, you can find out about how to purchase them there. And please sign up for my newsletter, which will keep you up to date on my tour schedule and personal appearances. Plus, we didn't even get into the whole psychic explorer thing that I'm doing now, where I'm leading people to mystical and spiritual locations around the world. So that's a new venture that we're doing.
We're on a cruise.
Yes, down to the Yucatan, to the Mayan ruins. It was a great time. It was fun. It was spiritual. It was healing. And I was able to do readings for all of the attendees, and who were fantastic people. People. Great travelers, great adventurers, and and just being able to stand and look at the pyramid of Chichen Itza. Wow. Put that on your bucket list, everybody. That one's incredible. So to find out more about all that, please go to my website, evidenceofeternity.com.
Yes. And for our listener also, feel free to go to wedon'tdieradio.com, click on episode 124, and that's Mark Anthony's episode. And I have direct links to his newsletter, his books, and his website to make it easy, easy, easy. And I also have a favor for everybody. I have a new Facebook page. It's the thing to do here in 2016. If you go into Facebook and type in We Don't Die Radio, it's an easy way for you to get a hold of me and like the shows. I ask you to like the page, share the page, because you never know who in your life. They may not show it on their face, but they might be grieving the loss of a loved one. They might know someone who is terminally ill. They may have a fear of dying or a fear of living. And I tell you what, to listen to one of these episodes, even just this one, really got me jazzed up about my life and being responsible. So you never know. So I ask you to share. So Mark Anthony, you are a rock star. And I am so grateful that you were with us this hour. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll do something again. I'm pretty positive. And for our listener, thank you. Really thank you for spending your time. And I do listen to your recommendations, who you'd like as guests, as many of you know. So feel free to message me on Facebook or email me. Of course, our website is wedon'tdieradio.com. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and I have been your host on We Don't Die Radio. And I do believe with all of my heart that life is an education for the soul, and that your life here on earth is important. So I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.